I don't really know how to start shows.
Come on now, don't start liking me now.
So yeah, I'm funny compared to, well, you'll see later. I stand for mayhem!
I know a lot of fucking idiots that think a lot of shit is mean-spirited just because it goes against what they believe.
But the relief of comedy is it takes things that aren't funny and it allows us to laugh about them for an hour.
We got a purple suit to buy and a gigantic coffin.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Why Are You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast recorded here at the Vaulted Podcast Studios in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And today I'm pleased to introduce you to Jackie Gleason, one of the all-time greats in television history, and a guy that I didn't know. Another one of these like Lenny Bruce, Three Stooges, when we do these older episodes, I don't know if they're the most popular episodes, but I like them the most because I learn a lot. Like when we do, Patrice or O&A or Norm or whatever, I like it because I'm having fun talking about guys I loved. But like I knew all that shit already. Like in these, like I didn't know anything really about Jackie Gleason before I started looking into it. So I think it's he's got a very interesting career. The boys are all here today: Craig, Mike, Matt, Chef Lewis in the house. Shout out Chef Lewis for feeding these Neanderthals, and including myself. And if you want to support the show, if you listen for free, I appreciate it. Everywhere you get podcasts, make sure you subscribe, 5-star review, all of that. Tell your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment. All of that helps the algorithm. And if you like episodes a week early, if you want to support us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/blindmike. You get Why Are You Laughing episodes a week early, as well as, the Blind Mike Project and other bonus content. So make sure you do that now. And let's just get into Jackie Gleason here, boys. So every once in a while on this program, we find a character that I become more obsessed with than the subject itself. Like someone played a role in their lives that I'm fascinated by, like Eric Monty with Norman Lear, or Harry Cohn, of course, is the best example with the Stooges. And today there's a guy, we're not going to talk about him long, but I am fascinated by this guy. So Jackie Gleason is born, and then a few years later, Jackie Gleason had a brother who died of, I'm blanking on the disease. I'm blanking on the disease. I don't want to get it wrong. Thank you. But he died at a young age. I think his brother was 14 maybe when he died, and Jackie was a little younger. This weighed heavily on the family, strained the parents' marriage. And then the mother became very smothering of Jackie, her baby, the only one she had left. So she, focused all of her attention on Jackie. And while she was focusing on Jackie, in the other direction, Jackie's father, one day, December 14th of what year was that? 1925?
Yes,
25. Which would make Jackie, I think, 9 years old. His father collected all the family photos, and everyone that he was in, he threw in the garbage. And then the next morning, he packed his things, grabbed his coat and hat, walked out the door. No one ever heard from him again.
Deleted his Twitter history. Jackie's brother Clem died of meningitis at 14.
Meningitis. Yes, thank you. I knew it was something that we've eradicated, but I have no idea if that's true. I made that up. I find it fascinating. Like, the old dad went out for a pack of cigarettes and never came back. Yeah. It was an all too real thing. I always assumed that was like a funny little anecdote that never really happened.
Dad went out to the garbage dump with all our photos and never came back.
My favorite part of that, and the most baffling part, is that he threw away all the photos as if to say, like, not only am I leaving you, I don't want you to even remember what I looked like. Well, I don't want you to ever think of me again.
It avoids them being able to go put his picture on a milk carton. It's like, don't bother.
Right.
Don't even try. I'm not coming back.
That's so great. I mean, it's horrible, obviously, but I find that I admire the will that it takes to just get up and leave.
I'm not missing. I left.
Good luck trying to draw me, you meningitis-ridden losers.
Yeah, I want you to understand the pictures didn't disappear by accident. I was not kidnapped. I am very much left on my own.
You and your brother with the swollen brain.
Yeah, so good for Herbert Gleason, I think, or whatever his name was.
It's probably why Jackie smoked so much.
Yeah,
He's like, I'm one of these days I'm going to run into my dad again.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll get into it later. It's all the other fascinating angle of that is I'm always fascinated by stories where like some childhood trauma, and I, God knows I have it, and pretty much everyone does it on some level, where like something in your childhood that your parents did affected you, and despite you hating that, you kind of repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that as we go on a little bit.
A boy named Sue moment.
Yeah. But so now Jackie's a kid. His brother died. His dad's not around. And he gets involved with they called it a gang. I don't know if it's a gang in the sense that we knew it, but basically he was a pool hustler. Like he was a kid, which I imagine would lend itself to people taking you less seriously. And he became like very skilled at pool and just like took people's money, basically.
Was he one of those guys who like stood around a burning barrel singing doo-wop songs?
Yeah, that is what I imagine like 1920s gangs
A
being.
local gang, you see?
Burn barrels and switchblades.
Very menacing. Yeah.
No, we don't wear ties.
The Van Buren boys.
Just the rest of the suits.
You take one look at Jackie Gleason and you absolutely understand that he was a pool hustler. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
The Van Buren boys, that's a great reference.
So he fit the role so well that he was nominated for an Academy Award for his role in The Hustler with Paul Newman, I think that starred. And like he did all his own trick shots in the movie and everything. So it ended up paying off. But yeah, as a kid, he would get into trouble. And
that's cheating.
What do you mean?
Playing what you are on the movie and getting an Oscar for it. It'd be like if Daniel Day-Lewis was really a cripple when he did My Left Foot.
I suppose. I guess.
The Hustler.
Let's just pretend he didn't say anything.
It's just a bad joke.
Now it's the only way he could get a role. It's like, well, he doesn't identify as a pool hustler. How could we put him in this part?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jackie was a mischievous kid. And his mother, much like when we talked about Louis Anderson, his mother smothered him, gave him all sorts of love and affection, which may be why he was like spoiled in the sense of like eating, like he was smothered with food and things like that, which may have led itself to kind of the weight problems that he had throughout life. But then his mother died when he was 19, so he was out on his ass with. The legend has it. Again, I'm always skeptical of these type of stories, but legend has it. He had 36 cents in his pocket. Like, I don't know how I don't know how he remembered the exact amount.
Like every Italian immigrant that gets off the boat here.
Yeah, right. So he died at 19. The girl he was dating at the time, her parents said, like, you can stay with us, but he was too proud. Jackie wanted to make it on his own, and then he had a buddy tell him. The thing I'm most fascinated by in this story is I always love 1930s dollars. You know what I mean? I love hearing about 1920s, 1930s money. So Jackie started in comedy. He already knew he wanted to be in comedy, and he was a hustler, man. Like, for all his partying and antics, he was a fucking workhorse. And that started at a very young age. He was always trying to get jobs, whether it's hosting or whatever, in comedy. And then he really hit it big, hit the jackpot, when his buddy gave him a tip about a gig in Pennsylvania. And he worked there for a week, and it paid him $19.
Hot damn.
Righteous bucks.
Hot damn.
Pretty sweet, if you ask me.
In
He
today's
flew private home.
in today's dollars, that would be 305.
Whoa. Mr. Rockefeller.
305.
Some righteous bucks.
Yeah, so he could have retired, but he decided not to. He forged on. And so he kind of, even from a young age, he tried to be this like jack of all trades in comedy. He would perform like music comedy acts. He tried straight stand-up. I guess he was not very good at that. I guess he bombed as a stand-up. But where he found success was what seemed to be, maybe I have this wrong. I'm not a historian, but the way it was described, it seemed, the way I put it in the notes, I think, is like, it seemed like just Dick's Last Resort. Are you familiar with that restaurant?
Yeah.
Like the rude restaurant where they're like, hey, straighten your tie, you bum. It's like,
They'll just have a hat that says whore on it or something.
yeah,
I mean, that's what it says now.
can I get a cheeseburger? And they're like, get out of here, you
ruffian.
you turkey. And you're like, can I have it or not? I don't
Sure, fatty.
Are you gonna bring me my food or what? So it sounded like that, where he was like this insult comedian that would go to people's tables, I guess. Again, I don't quite it's nothing that exists today. But it's kind of a vaudevillian. Like he started in vaudeville, and you could definitely tell that a little bit in his act, or well, whatever you could call it his act, but whatever you want to call it. And so that's where he was discovered. Like whatever, he was waiting on someone that was with, I want to say Warner Brothers is where he started, if I'm not mistaken. And he was signed to, this kid skyrocketed from a guy who was making $19 a week to $250, which is what I was making at Barstool as an intern, actually. So who am I to poo-poo this? But
in 2022, that's about $4,000.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty good
money.
That's actually pretty good. So now he starts making $250. Did I skip anything?
No. After Dick's Last Resort, he was, his physical appearance.
Yeah. So he gets signed to this film deal. I think some of them did okay. He was not like a household name by any means. But even at this age, he started really partying. And they say there was one instance where he was staying at a hotel and they had to soundproof his room because he was disturbing other patrons, other residents of the hotel.
So loud.
That was just when he walked on the floor.
Yeah, it was when he was shitting. But yeah, so also around this time, you got to remember, a lot of guys are doing the best they can to avoid the draft and things like that. This is now we're around World War II.
World War II.
Yeah. So luckily, Jackie got married and he had kids. And for a while, they weren't drafting people with kids. Like if you were a father, you were exempt from the draft. And eventually, this guy, Hitler, was causing all sorts of problems, and they needed more men. So that wasn't a good enough excuse. But luckily for Jackie, he had a little nerve damage in his hand, and also he was 100 pounds overweight. So they said, all right, you don't need to sign up for the army. He was 100 pounds overweight. He smoked 4 to 6 packs a day.
Oh, boy.
He was a booze hound. The man was not healthy, to say the least. And there's also a story of, so as I mentioned, he got married, and he did not want to get married. He was a man who liked to chase, skirt, and bang beaver, if you know what I'm saying. So he didn't, he was a man that didn't want to settle down. But this was such a 1930s type of story. He was seeing this woman, his first wife, who was kind of a traditional lady. And she said, Jackie, if we're going to keep doing this, I want to get married. And he said, I ain't getting married, you dame. And I'm sure he knocked her out. And went on his merry way.
And when she woke up.
So I guess at one of his shows, like he started, he had nightclub shows and things like that. I guess at one of his shows, she showed up with a guy and sat in the front row. And then like he, caught his eye. And then when the show ended, right in front of her date, he got down on one knee and proposed. So this poor cuck has to watch this lady plot trying to get Jackie Gleason to marry her. But I just think that's a very 1930s type of, like, it's like classic romantic comedy.
What a schmo.
Yeah. But Jackie probably was right in not wanting to get married because he's a man, like I said, he likes to, go out in the town.
Man of extreme taste.
Have some fun. So he had 2 kids, and you remember the story about Jackie's father. Remember a few minutes ago when I said that his dad just one day got up and left?
Yep. Jackie
was a much more compassionate guy. When it came to Christmas around the household, he'd stick around for like 30 minutes and then he'd leave and go drinking with his buddies. They said he was notorious for on holidays, like he'd be around for a minute and then just leave and get shit-faced with his buddies. So he really was Ralph Kramden. Norton, we're going drinking. He was that. He seemed like that kind of a guy. And by all accounts, we'll get more into it, but not a great guy. And literally, I didn't realize how much, I always heard Jackie Gleason, that name kind of lumped in with Belushi, Chris Farley, Artie Lang, guys like that. I didn't realize it's almost like they ripped a page out of his playbook. Like he was the original guy, like a big fat fuck partier. Comedy bad boy. Yeah, for sure. He really was. But that put a strain on a lot of his relationships. And he has a pretty wild romantic life, which seems to be, we're now a romantic comedy podcast, I guess. We just follow people's marriages every week. But before I get there, I want to make sure we're not missing anything. So where are we, Matt?
We'll talk about his. He performed in TV, film, music, Broadway. Had a successful nightclub act, which you just talked about.
Yeah, so I was surprised how much of like a multi-talented guy
Real Renaissance
he was.
man.
He really was, and he loved like he would do musical comedy. We'll get to his music in a second. But like he tried performing music comedy. He loved big dance numbers. Like on the Jackie Gleason Show, he would have he's open with these big dance numbers. He was a real song and dance man, which you wouldn't expect a guy of his build.
Like a Seth MacFarlane type.
I mean, it seemed like he was interested in the same stuff. Yeah, that's probably not a bad analogy. Which is very of the time, I guess. But he seemed kind of like a guy who was funny, but didn't know what he wanted to do with that. You know, like he didn't know if he wanted to be on Broadway or stand up, but he was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, as they say. So where am I? I'm losing my train of thought.
There's a note here. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but something as a communist, blacklisted as a communist.
Oh yeah, not Jackie. But,
Yeah.
So the original woman that played. So yeah, he had a show called the Jackie Gleason Show originally, which was like a variety show, and there were a lot of sketches on that show, including the Honeymooners. That's where the Honeymooners comes from. The original woman that played Alice was black. It's funny to like look up this shit because you kind of forget it happened, like when you just go through life. But the woman that played Alice was blacklisted for either being a communist or communist sympathizer, as a lot of people were at that time. Like you forget about that. And Jackie Gleason was, really resistant to doing that. Like he really didn't want to, because he didn't give a fuck. He just wanted to put on a show. But eventually he did. So I just thought that was an interesting note. Was all.
And the House Committee on Un-American Activities came after her.
Yeah, amazing given Jackie's
McCarthy.
lifestyle that he really didn't give a fuck.
Yeah,
He was like,
right.
who cares? She could be a spy for all I care.
Senator McCarthy's coming for you. Hey, who gives a fuck? She's a funny broad.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we got the Honeymooners, which didn't gain popularity till syndication.
Which I didn't know. That's kind of this was like the original, like we talked about Chappelle's show with DVD sales or something like that. I didn't know that was the case. I thought Honeymooners was just, I knew it was on, I knew it was 39 episodes. And I just assumed it was a hit. And for whatever reason, they didn't make any more. That's all they made.
Real
was 39.
smash.
Yeah. It was not. It was fairly low ratings. I want to say.
Finished 19th.
I was going to say, 19th.
Oh, shit.
So they finished 19th in the ratings, which remember, when you have 3 stations is pretty rough. That's not great.
That's true.
So the Honeymooners didn't take off. However, the Jackie Gleason Show, in its, I forget if it was his first or second season, was second overall in the ratings.
Yep.
The Jackie Gleason Show is doing quite well. The Honeymooners sketch came from that. And then they made 39 episodes, which, here's another wild stat from back in the day. 39 episodes was 1 season of television.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they did 1 season of TV, didn't do great. But Jackie, so he was for a guy who was completely wet-brained, it seemed, was a very forward-thinking guy. So the way they shot, I want to say, is ColecoVision a thing? Is that the way they shot TV
Well,
shows
that
back
was
then?
That's a video game console.
Yeah,
Okay,
ColecoVision
no,
was a video
but,
game
okay,
console.
then it's I sound like an idiot, but it does sound like that, whatever it is. Some new way of shooting.
Magnavision or something silly like that.
Something like that. But a new way of shooting that they had to capture live performances is how they shot the Honeymooners. And this lent itself to, like, for example, the first, when Carson was in New York, like the early days of The Tonight Show, that doesn't exist anywhere because, like, they recorded over it. Like, a weird shit.
Holy shit.
Weird shit like that happened back then. But for whatever reason, like Jackie Gleason was able to shoot it in a way that kind of held up, and they saved it. And 10 years later, after the Honeymooners was 54, I want to say, something like that.
Yeah.
10 years later, they ran it in reruns a bunch, and then it gained a ton of popularity. And then throughout the years after that, they would bring it back in different variations. TV was so weird back then. Like, reading up on this shit, it's hard for me to even understand what certain programs were. Like, they would bring things back for a 1-hour special, And like that happened fairly often. They would try new things and they reshot it in color and showed that. But regardless, the Honeymooners had different variations on television and just gained popularity over time, which I can't think of another example. Maybe Isle of Lucy was like that. I have no idea. But I can't think of another example of something that gained popularity over time in the 1950s that wasn't popular immediately, you know?
So it was called Kinescope.
Kinescope. Thank you.
Okay, I have heard of that before.
ColecoVision.
Yeah.
An asshole. Yes, Kinescope was the way he shot.
Yeah, it was developed in the early 1950s, which allowed for a live performance to be directly captured on film.
Yes.
So you could live it and also record it.
Right. Yeah, and he also had in his contract streaming rights, so he was a real forward-thinking guy. He said, "When this is on Netflix, you'll find out what that means."
Yeah, you'll know what that is.
What's next?
His music.
Oh God. So
Is it? I don't know it.
Oh, I don't know if
it's
it's
better than Rappin' Rodney.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
So the music is not what I'm mocking. What I'm kind of laughing at is the idea. You know what Jackie Gleason looks like, everyone, right? A stout man of a gruff kind of. I mean, on the Honeymooners, Ralph Kramden was like a bus driver.
Yeah, he was literally a bus driver.
That's the look that Jackie Gleason had.
He looks like a bus driver, yes.
Yet, he specialized in what is called mood music.
Hey, so does Barry White.
He set the mood for the ladies.
You know what Barry White and Luther Vandross looks like?
Yes.
He's a big fried chicken eating motherfucker.
Norton, when you're laying down your woman, you want to listen to me. So I guess Jackie Gleason said, like, hey, you know, I want to make some tunes that smooth jazz cats can make love to throughout Brooklyn. So it was this kind of like jazzy mood music, and it was wildly successful. The only, I believe, still to this day, I could be wrong about this, but at least for a time, the only album to remain on the Billboard charts for 153 consecutive weeks. Wildly successful. Jackie Gleason put out 10 albums that each sold over 1 million copies.
Holy shit.
So this guy was a dynamo in the music biz.
I guess.
But that's not without controversy. So evidently...
Why, who stole his money?
Yeah, right. Harry Cohn got involved. No, so evidently Jackie could not read or write music.
Okay.
So I guess if you were asking Jackie, the way he'd come up with a tune in his head, like the Honeymooners theme song, which by the way he's credited with, and whatever this music is, and just go Scooby-Dooby ba ba ba, and someone would put that to trumpet apparently. However,
so he was in a punk band.
Sure, yeah,
Right?
yeah. But everyone that played in this band said, Jackie's full of shit. he didn't have anything to do with it. One guy, I think, is trumpeter. Now, to be fair to Jackie, to give the whole story, while the guy was working for him, he did say Jackie's got a brilliant ear for music. His ability to conduct. I guess Jackie was a conductor that couldn't read music somehow. But he was very, very praising of Jackie's abilities. And then when he didn't work for Jackie anymore, he said, they said, what was Jackie's role in these mood music albums? And the guy said, bringing us the checks. So he had his name on all of these, but it's very questionable how much involvement he had. And what was the name of the? Did I put that, Matt?
Oh yeah,
the name of his number one album.
Music for Lovers Only.
Yeah, that was my favorite part. Music for Lovers Only, ladies and gentlemen, Jackie Gleason.
150 topped the charts for 153 weeks.
That's
insane.
Thriller didn't even do that. For God's sake.
No.
So good for Jackie and his music ability. I choose to believe, he was one of the smoothest jazz cats out there, but it remains to be seen. We may never know the truth. So once we get past his music career, where do we go next?
So we have the first clip. You're in the picture.
Yes. So now we talked about his greatest success in the music biz. Obviously, his greatest success was probably the Honeymooners, I would think. But, he's reached all kinds of heights, but it wasn't without lows. So evidently, You're in the Picture was some kind of game show where my understanding is, by the way, this is everything I'm about to mention is on YouTube, like in an hour-long straight show, and the quality's not terrible, so if you want to go watch it, feel free to check it out. But You're in the Picture was evidently like some mix of charades and I don't even know what. Basically, they would have like celebrities on, and I guess I watched, Gleason was only on Carson once in 85. And I watched him with Carson, and apparently Carson said he was on this show, You're in the Picture, and the premise was like they would bring out different, when you're at like the carnival, and they have like different the thing with the hole where you put your face through it, and there's a picture around it, like you're on a farm or whatever. It was that, and you had to give the person clues, and they had to guess what picture they were in,
what they were, what their profession
So it was essentially
was.
charades and Pictionary.
The game where you put like the name on your head, like they played in The Office.
Yeah.
Like, you're bad at driving. He's like, I'm a woman.
Yeah, basically.
Honestly, we should go back to joke stealing because Jimmy Fallon does shit like this all the time.
Does he really?
He does.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy Fallon does all stupid shit like that all the time.
You know he giggles?
Quick side note, I saw Tim Dillon in Providence the other night, and he had a very funny line. Like he was talking about late night comedy or something, and he goes, they try to be political, and then you'll switch to NBC, and Jimmy Fallon says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Zac Efron playing checkers tonight." Which I thought was very funny.
He always does like some stupid shit. You describing it sounds like just like Late Night with Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, so that's how far we've come now. We're reverting back to what is considered, I didn't say this yet, You're in the Picture, aired, and I think CBS or whatever network had it at the time, picked it up for X amount of episodes. So the pilot airs. Everyone sees the first episode, and it is widely reviewed as one of the greatest bombs of all time.
Oh, no.
So what Jackie Gleason did, I think, is one of the more innovative things we've talked about on this show, maybe, because it's something that opens the door for so much that, to my knowledge, did not exist in entertainment before this. I found it so fascinating. The second episode of You're in the Picture was not a game show at all. Jackie Gleason walked out and just trashed the program for 30 minutes. So we have a clip of that. Let's hear a little bit.
He Norm Macdonald did it?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll notice that there is no panel tonight. As a matter of fact, there's nothing here except the orchestra and myself. I'd like to modify that. There is one other thing. We have a creed tonight. And the creed is honesty is the best policy. Now, this program could be the most fascinating you'll ever watch. I know this, that it's the first of its kind. And could very easily be the last. Oh, it's good. Now, while I said that we didn't have a panel or anything like that, we do have a premise. And the premise is this. Last week we did a show called You're in the Picture that laid, without a doubt, the biggest bomb. I'm telling you, friends, that I've seen bombs in my day. This would make the H-bomb look like a 2-inch salute.
So we kind of take for granted that happens. In fact, you couldn't have a show go horribly wrong without addressing it. You would have to address it now. But back then, that wasn't done. And Jackie said, instead of continuing this horse shit, instead of doing this game every week for 6 weeks and then canceling it, why not just I come out, address it, make fun of it? That'll get more ratings than this dog shit did. And then I think for the remaining however many weeks was left on their deal, Jackie Gleason just did a talk show of some kind. But I thought that was so great that in 1957, whatever that is, to have the foresight to be like, I can tell you what's going to be better is me just going out bullshitting for half an hour.
Crowd was hot too.
Crowd was hot, and
they were into it.
He was completely. He was on for the entire half hour, just shitting all over it. He said, "I knew it was bad when I walked off stage and asked someone, how did it go?" And they said, "You look great on camera." So it was very funny. Also, I watched the whole thing, and my main takeaway was like how they used to do commercials back then. So Jackie's standing out there for half an hour, and he goes, "And now we're going to break for commercial. Lucky strike." And he just starts telling you about it. Like they didn't have real commercials. It was just Jackie talking. But yeah, shout out to Jackie for being, like I said, an innovative guy. That's the part I didn't really realize.
That's pretty great.
And also just in the writing of The Honeymooners, he basically said, and he was in this marriage he didn't want to be in, which is different than what The Honeymooners were. Like the idea was that they really loved each other.
Yeah.
But he kind of, had the foresight of saying like, it's something we completely have, like I said about Norman Lear, like he blazed all these trails. We've been throwing brush on him for 10 years. Same with Jackie Gleason, where he said like the idea is that we have this couple that, gets in the fights, but at the end of the day, they love each other. Now we look back at The Honeymooners and we're like, oh my, he was threatening to assault her. And it's like, well, the point is he didn't. That's the entire.
He never did.
That's the entire point of the show. But yeah, a much more innovative guy than I realized. So shout out to Jackie Gleason for all of that. What's next, Matt?
He got paid by CBS.
Oh yeah,
big bank.
He, unlike our pals the Stooges, he had his way with CBS. I don't know if Harry Cohn was there for this.
Yeah, they got wind of this and broke boards extra hard over it.
So actually, it was around the same time, I think. So it must have.
50s.
But
we took all three of their money and gave it to Jackie.
yeah. So Jackie signed a deal in the early 50s, and the deal was $100,000 a year for 20 years, no matter what. So who's the guy on the Mets?
Exactly.
Bobby Bonilla?
Bobby Bonilla.
Where he gets $1 million a year still?
Yeah. I was going to say, this is the exact kind of contracts that the NFL doesn't give out.
Yeah. So it was, even if he got nothing on television, he was getting this $100,000.
Oh, boy.
So the guy is a shrewd businessman. He may have been a fucking booze hound. But you know what? I would say that's the big difference between Jackie Gleason and a lot of these guys that followed him, whether it's Belushi or Farley or whoever, that Jackie did seem, despite the partying, like also a very good businessman, like a guy who could kind of get it under control.
He knew his worth
when it mattered.
Right.
Now, cast members wouldn't necessarily describe him as that. I guess he was not. He was not a real peach to work with. Evidently, he hated rehearsal and hated like learning his lines. So he would have the cast of any show, but let's use The Honeymooners, for example, because I guess they really hated him for it. And by the way, I tried to find the cast of The Honeymooners bashing him, and all I could find was like Art Carney do an episode where he was a bit gruff to work with, but we loved it. And I was like, come on, Art, you son of a bitch. Give me something here. But he evidently, like, he didn't want to rehearse, so he would make them rehearse with a stand-in, and it was so like unprofessional that I think I forget if it was the woman that played Alice or the woman that played Trixie, Norton's wife, said it would literally give her anxiety. Like she had a hard time performing because she was like, I don't know if I'm doing any of this right. Like this is not the way you do things. And they said like he would ad-lib sometimes because he didn't know the script, which would send the plot in a totally different direction because he was getting the lines wrong. And things like that. So yeah, he was a real piece of work to deal with. And that's not to go without mentioning his drinking. So he usually showed up to set either drunk or with drink in hand. So if he wasn't drunk, he was getting there fairly often. So yeah, he was a bit of a piece of work to deal with, this guy. Kind of like we talked about with Kinison, where it's like, as we talk about it, there were two different guys here. He was a comedy great, a comedy legend, did a lot for comedy, and also kind of a piece of shit in real life, where are we now, Matt?
His love life.
Oh yeah. So I mentioned the first wife.
Mm-hmm.
So the first foreshadowing. The first wife, they got married in the 30s. I want to say around 36, something like that.
Shit.
And they were married for 34 years, I want to say. Which you might look at that and say, well, it was a happy marriage that eventually they just fell out of love with each other. But apparently what happened was his wife was very much Catholic, which in those days, if you were Catholic, you didn't get divorced.
You sure didn't.
Nope. Yeah. I'm also finding out if you're Muslim in this century, you don't get divorced, apparently, which frightens the shit out of me. But anyways, I digress. So his wife would never grant him a divorce, even though he was out carousing. Like I said, the guy barely showed up to fucking Christmas with his kids. He was not necessarily a present father, a present husband, and he liked, banging some coos. Like, don't we all, So he tried to get out of this marriage. Wife said no dice until they separated a few times and would, get back together. They were technically separated twice. And then I believe the third time was a legal separation, I think. And then Jackie got injured on set one day, rolled his ankle or something like that. And it was on. Walk Hard must have stole this. You ever seen Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story? And I'm sure this happened more than once in Hollywood, but it reminded me just literally a scene out of that where the wife shows up to surprise him. And he's just banging some dancer, Marianne Taylor, who we'll get into in a minute. So the wife finally granted divorce mercifully in 1970.
Now,
we're not home free yet, folks. So 1970, Jackie gets divorced. Backtrack a little bit to 1968. Jackie always he was in love with that Marianne Taylor that he was banging. But she was, in the time after that happened, where his wife caught him, wouldn't grant him the divorce for a while, and then finally got divorced. In that time somewhere, Marianne Taylor got married and had a kid. So she was off the table for the J-Men. Then Jackie met some other broad in 1968, and they're going pretty hot and heavy. And finally, Jackie is granted divorce in 1970. 10 days later, marches down the aisle again and says, we're going to try it again. This is the one, I swear.
A glutton for punishment.
So 10 days later, he's married.
Yeah.
And then that takes us, if I'm not mistaken, to 1972. Am I right about that?
75.
75, okay. So this lasted a little longer. He was married for 5 years, I guess. And finally, they got divorced. Now, in that time, as I said, Jackie was in love with that Marianne Taylor. Her husband died. And much like Ralph Kramden himself, Jackie devised a plan. And said, finally, that old schmuck is gone. I can swoop in on this dame. So, 1975, Jackie gets divorced. A month later, he's marrying this other broad.
A lot of gray areas.
Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay,
So
good.
she caused the breakup of 2 of his marriages.
Yes.
I can't fail this again.
So what's next here?
After the marriages,
Yeah.
Jackie's lawsuit against Hanna-Barbera.
Oh, yeah. So I was thinking Honeymooners launched a ton of sitcoms. Like, there's a ton of sitcoms you could look at, and clearly,
The Simpsons, Family Guy.
King of Queens.
Yeah.
King of Queens literally is the Honeymooners with an old man in the basement. But like the premise is like kind of an out of shape, curmudgeon-y husband with the wife who's always riding his ass. I mean, even like Everybody Loves Raymond, even family sitcoms were like that.
Yeah.
So that launched a lot of that. But the one that I would say did it most was the Flintstones.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, literally, it's basically Ralph and Alice and Ed Norton and Trixie. You know what I mean? Like fucking Barney Rubble and Fred always getting into mischief. And I don't think they necessarily hid that. Like at least I think they were outwardly paying homage to the Honeymooners.
Yeah.
But Jackie was none too pleased with that. And he wanted to file suit. But luckily, his representation was able to convince him. They were like, Jackie, this is literally introducing the Honeymooners to all different kinds of, like a whole new generation. Don't do this. And so he smartened up and dropped the lawsuit. But he did want to go at it with toe-to-toe with Fred Flintstone for a minute. And just real quick, back to that the marriage thing. I did want to touch on the idea that, like, I'm fascinated how many guys we've covered now that are, like, obsessed with getting married. I don't understand it. Where you're, you know, in the prime of making all this money, how do you fail at something like 3 times and just be like, I'm gonna keep
obsessed, like they keep doing it?
Yeah. Like,
I think you like saying that. I'm like, I'm married.
Me too.
No. Well, yes. If you got divorced tomorrow and remarried in 10 days,
I understand.
then I would ask you the same question.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So I find that fascinating. It's like more and more guys in comedy we're finding are like that.
Ric Flair's the worst at it, though.
How many times was he married?
5 or 6.
Ugh.
Good for him. Well, Larry King's worse than that. Larry King was a 7 or 8, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like 2 of them were like twice or something, right?
That's even crazier, in my opinion.
It is.
But I feel like it makes it like 5, not,
Yeah,
not
I
7
guess.
or 8.
What's next, Matt?
Well, you can go. You talked about he smoked 4 to 6 packs a day. He already said that. Christmas, and then at his funeral.
Yeah, so I mean, this is sad. Like, well, I guess we'll talk about some of his other roles first. Obviously, he was in. You kind of forget he was in Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh yeah.
Burt Reynolds said
We
he
had
wouldn't.
Dr. Pepper and the Diablo sandwich.
Burt Reynolds demanded Jackie be in that movie.
Yeah.
Because he said like an older, gruffer guy like that would kind of give it so it would make it feel real.
Yeah,
like he felt like Jackie fit that role.
Boss hog.
His last movie, I didn't know this until I watched the. I've never seen this movie until I watched the episode of Carson that he was on, because he was on promoting Nothing in Common, I think the name of it was, with Tom Hanks, which I guess was critically acclaimed. I'm not aware of it, but it was one of Tom Hanks's earlier movies. And it's funny when you think of like because in that movie, the way it was described as like he's playing like an Archie Bunker-esque character. And I was like, I think Archie Bunker is kind of a Ralph Kramden-esque character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I would call Ralph Kramden kind of the inspiration for Archie Bunker. Now, Archie Bunker's a hell of a lot more nuanced. You know what I mean? Like a much deeper. There was a lot more writing that went into that. It wasn't the same shtick over and over again necessarily. But like people forget how influential Jackie Gleason was early on. Like, I didn't know how successful his TV career was. I thought he was kind of the Honeymooners, and that was it.
That was it.
But like the Jackie Gleason show was very successful. This variety show was very successful, and that is other characters that were like Joe the bartender and Reginald something, some rich guy. Like these were pretty popular characters back then.
Joe the bartender. What was that from?
That was his character from the Jackie Gleason show.
Oh, the Jackie Gleason show?
You might be thinking of Mo the bartender from The Simpsons. Yeah, but the sad end to it all, and I don't know how close he and his daughter were, but I know like in reading and watching stuff on him, they would reference that like he told his daughter at a certain point that he didn't have a lot longer to live, things like that. So I don't know if they became close at the end, whatever it was. But he was not close with many of his cast members. The only person he starred in film or television with was the woman that played Alice in The Honeymooners. And that's probably, she might have felt obligated to go. I don't know if they were particularly close. But not even like, like I said, Burt Reynolds raved about him. I don't think he was there. So he was not a very well-liked guy, unfortunately, in Hollywood.
She only went to see him actually get put in the ground, so she didn't have to get so defensive.
Just wanted to, yeah. I didn't want to flinch. But he had a wild move on his deathbed where his wife, it was something like his wife was originally supposed to get the majority of his money. And like the day before he died, he switched that and ended up giving his secretary like a sizable chunk. Like this woman worked with him for I think like 30 years, and he ended up giving her a shit ton of money like the day before he died. So he went out like a true baller on his terms,
Fuck you, kids.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, Jackie, I mean, he had a tremendous amount of influence. Like unfortunately, probably a lot of guys, like I think our generation at least certainly knows the name, but younger than him, no one knows who the fuck Jackie Gleason is, unfortunately. You know what I mean? But he had such an impact and such an influence on comedy that I never realized how deep it went. Just that you're in the picture thing, I'll never get over. Like, that's crazy.
It's kind of awesome.
The foresight to have done that in 1950, whatever. You know,
especially because, like you said, there's not that many channels, and you go on and trash your own show.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's that's what like Norm did when he got fired and stuff like that. But there's not. That's what he did in his monologue, I guess. You could compare it to that. But I can't think of anything even before like the 90s where that type of shit happened. So he was well ahead of his time. So Jackie Gleason, we remember you fondly. Anything else, boys, before we get out of here?
There's one clip left. The Rocky Marciano and Jackie Gleason clip.
Oh, yeah, let's play that. I thought it was just kind of a funny story. I found this because Lenny Clark told this story of Jackie doing stand-up one night, and Jackie himself tells this to Rocky Marciano.
I was working at a joint called the Miami Club in Newark, and it was a real tough joint. As a matter of fact, they called it the Bucket of Blood. And one night, I was doing the show, and there was a little fat, bald-headed guy at the ringside. And every time I came out to introduce an act or tell a joke, he would say something derisive, nasty. And I was heisting a few at the time. And I said to the owner of the joint, I said, that guy is driving me nuts. I said, now, if he doesn't stop, I'm going to take care of him. So I came out and another time, and he began to heckle. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, will you excuse me for a moment? I would like to invite this gentleman to step out on Clinton Avenue. And I'd like to take good care of him, and then we can do the show without any interruptions. I never saw anybody get up as fast as this guy did. Now we get out on Clinton Avenue. I said, now you're going, and that's the last I remember. The next thing that I recall, I was on the floor of the cellar next to the furnace. A doctor was there, the owner of the joint. And they had brought me too, and I said to him, who was that guy? He says, that was Tony Galento. I said, did you know it was Tony Galento? He said, sure. I said, well, why didn't you tell me? He said, well, you're a wise guy. I thought I'd let you go up against him. But that was really a big mistake.
So Tony Galento is a professional boxer that just knocked the shit out of him.
I was going to say I thought it was Rickles because he was like, oh, it's a small bald man that was giving me a hard time. I was like, oh, that's funny.
That's another. I just love those stories because they're like 1950s type of Hollywood stories.
Yeah. Come here, fella.
Ah, you want to take it outside, see?
We're going to go on Clinton Avenue and settle our differences.
It's just me or it's Rocky Marciano terrifying looking.
Oh, yeah.
He always looks like he's about to hit someone.
It'd be great if Rocky knocked him out after that story.
Oh, boy.
So, you just see his left arm come through.
Just a meaty fist come from the side of the screen. Just
yeah. So one of the greats, I have a newfound respect for Jackie Gleason after doing this. And, I will look into more of his work. Now, I'll go back. But he didn't have a ton of interviews, unfortunately. But he did miraculously live. He died in like 87, which I think would make him 71, I believe. So he lived a hell of a lot longer than people anticipated. So good for him. And make sure you listen to these boys, Craig and Mike, on Very Good Show. Matt from Rhode Island is the curator here at Vaulted Podcasts in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So if you guys want any, you want to record a podcast, you want to film something, whatever, hit up Matt from RI on Twitter or go to Vaulted Podcasts RI, as in Rhode Island.com. And as I said, you want these episodes a week early? You want to just support the program, whatever. Go to patreon.com/blindmike, and you'll find us there. All sorts of bonus content as well. And then on to the next one. Talk to you guys later.